Update 37.2 goes live today on Lotro, and as usual in this video I'm going to look at all of the new changes. The biggest news by far in this update is of course the new Mariner class releasing. And I've explained this class in detail in a lot of videos, so this one is just going to be the short version. The Mariner class is a medium armor class. It has 3 different trait lines. The duelist, the red line, is DPS, where you deal damage. Blue line, the shanty caller, is sort of like a red captain, where you support your group and help them deal more damage. And the rover, yellow line, is kind of like a yellow lore master or a yellow burglar, where you focus on debuffing and crowd control. The Mariner class also has a balance system, as you can see from this bar here in the middle. And basically, depending on the type of skills you use, you will push this bar either fore, which is to the right side, or aft, which is backwards to the left. Typically, the damage dealing skills will put you fore, and buffs, healing, and CC skills will put you aft. So in essence, the way that this is supposed to work is that you push yourself either direction, either fore or aft, and once you get to either side pretty far, you want to use a finisher skill, and then recenter back to the middle to keep your balance. If you go too far, either towards the right or towards the left, you will get debuffs, you get stunned, you get missed chance, stuff like that. Bad things will happen. So the idea is to build towards one side, use a finisher, go back to the center, and keep building towards the side, go back towards the center. So as a Mariner, you want to keep your balance and never go too far to either side. With this patch, we also get the major changes to how some buffs interact with each other. And I'm just going to look at a previous video that I did on the beta, like the second beta for this patch. And there's 3 different buffs we're going to look at. The first one is the Major Rent Armor. This effect can be applied by the Mariner with the Caustic Brew, by the Lore Master with Ancient Craft, and the Burglar with Trickster and a Trick. So this change basically means that these effects do not stack with each other. They can all give the Major Rent Armor debuff, which decreases the tactical and physical mitigations. The durations that they decrease are a bit different depending on the class, but these can never stack. For example, if you use Ancient Craft on a target, and then use the Trickster and a Trick on a target, the Major Rent from the Trick and from Ancient Craft will not stack together. So if you have several of these classes in your raids, you do want to try to spread out when you use these skills to maximize the uptime. But in short, Caustic Brew, Ancient Craft, Trickster, they all give the Major Rent effect, and these do not stack with each other. The second buff interaction change that do not stack with each other are the 3 really powerful incoming damage buffs. The first one from the Captain, the Oathbreaker's Shame, will not stack with the Mariner's new The Breaking of Thangorodrim skill, and they will also not stack with the Murder of Crows from the Blue Lore Master. So these 3 powerful incoming damage buffs will not stack with each other. For example, you cannot use Oathbreaker's Shame and at the same time The Breaking of Thangorodrim to stack the incoming damage with each other. Additionally, currently in the game, when you use Oathbreaker's Shame, there's a buff called Oath Fulfilled, which means there's 3 minutes between each usage of Oathies on that target. This has now changed. All of these 3 skills share this renewed defenses buff. Anytime you use either of these 3 on the target is immune for 45 seconds to either of these 3. And the reason for the renewed defenses is that you cannot chain these powerful buffs after each other, or if you want to bring 2 red captains, you can't do Oathbreaker's Shame and then right after Oathbreaker's Shame, or even if you use Call to Greatness from the Minstrel to reset it, you can't really do that. After using a powerful buff like Oathbreaker's Shame, you'll have to wait 45 seconds before you can apply it again. So the Oathies, the Bothies, and the Crowthies do not stack with each other, and they will have to be used 45 seconds apart if it's on the same target. And the final buff interaction is the buff called Minor Rent Armor, which reduces the tactical mitigations by 10%. This can only be applied from Pitch Pot from the Mariner, or the sticky tar puddle from the lore master, meaning that if the target is already in the sticky tar puddle, throwing pitch pot at that target will not stack and it will not be 20% tactical mitigations. Instead, it'll only be 10. So pitch pot and sticky tar do not stack with each other. And you might also notice that sticky tar no longer reduces fire mitigations, but rather minus 10% tactical mitigation. For the Beorning class, the improved Nature's Wrath, a skill you can trade for in Redline, should now correctly give 10 Wrath when you're dual wielding. Apparently there's a bug where you didn't get all your 10 Wrath if you had dual wield on a Beorning, but this bug should now be fixed. The Greater Bee Swarm should now leave the regular Bee Swarm dot behind when it expires. And Beornings can now correctly barter from the heavy armor in skirmish camp and not medium armor. For the Burglar class, like we've already seen with the buff interaction changes, using Trickster will apply the major rent debuff to the target. So Trickster, for example, Trickster and then Enraged on the target. The Trickster Enraged will apply the major rent armor debuff to the target, reducing all mitigations by 10% for 20 seconds. We have a change to a Red Burglar set bonus. The location is everything will change. This is how it currently works, but the bottom part, critical chain skills bypass 10% of the target's mitigations, will be changing. You no longer bypass mitigations just from being a burglar. This trait will instead increase critical chain skills damage. For the champion class, we have a few changes. The trait in yellow, the champion's advantage, will be changing from bypassing enemies' mitigations and will instead just be increasing blade damage. So instead of this trait having a chance to reduce your enemy's mitigations against your blade skills, it will instead be a chance to increase your blade skill damage. And just overall, we have a damage buff for the champion. Champion's blade skills, so any AoE skills such as Blade Wall, will get an increase by about 8%. And any strike skills for the champion, which is a single target hits such as the Ferocious Strikes, will get a damage increase by 20%. For the Guardian class, we will see some changes as well. The set bonus in Blue Line, the Bolstering Blocks set bonus, which currently makes every block restore a small amount of morale. I believe it heals 1% of your morale every time you block. This was giving your Guardians a bit too much HPS, so there will be a small nerf to this trait. It can now only proc once per second, so instead of getting healed by this on every block, you can now only get healed by this every second if you get a block. We also finally have a fix to the protection by the shield skill, the toggle skill you have in Blue Line, and if for any reason you get stunned, it will untoggle. This has now been fixed, and protection by the shield should stay active regardless if you get stunned or any negative combat states. This toggle skill should stay active. Damage for most Guardian skills has also been reduced by 5%. I think it's fair to say that the Red Guardian has been slightly overtuned, and I feel like Guardian might still be a bit too strong, but we'll see with this patch how the numbers turn out. And the bottom trait in Red, Rupture, has now been corrected to a 10-second duration at slightly reduced potency, with 10% being the max. For the Hunter class, we also have a couple of changes. The first change is to the trait Bodkin Arrows in Redline. This trait will change from this effect, minus 10% mitigation bypass for bow attacks. Basically, this trait made Hunters have a 10% mitigation bypass, so bypassing 10% more than most other classes. And like we've seen from this patch, most of the individual mitigation bypasses for most classes will be removed, and the same goes for Hunter. This will no longer give mitigation bypass. Instead, this trait will increase induction skill damage. And since the stat crunch, Hunters have been struggling a bit with their damage, so most Hunter skills are getting a buff by about 15%. So with this patch, hunters should be dealing more damage. For the Lore Master class, we have a couple of changes. The first one is to a Murder of Crows. The blue lane skill, and the way that this skill works currently on live is that for 15 seconds you increase the opponent's miss chance by 20% and their incoming damage by 10%. These two will switch places, meaning that the miss chance will be 10%, but the incoming damage will be 20%. And as we've seen before, this skill will not stack with the Oathbreaker's Shame or the breaking of the Thangorodrim from the Mariner. The other change is, of course, something that we've seen earlier in this video. The way that Ancient Craft will work has changed. No longer will it reduce the armor value, but instead a percentage of mitigations. So the base Ancient Craft will reduce the enemy's mitigations by 5%, but if you have the Enfeeble trait traded, for the first 10 seconds of Ancient Craft, it will reduce the enemy's mitigations by 15%, and then 10 seconds for the remainder of the effect. So Ancient Craft will apply the Major Rent debuff to the target, and it will not stack with the Trickster from the Burglar or the Caustic Brew from the Mariner. In the patch notes, there are also some notes about the Crafting Forester event in Combe, and according to the official schedule for the events, this event will go live in 10 days from now on October 13th. So there are notes here saying that it's ready to go, but it won't go active until 10 days from now. I'm just still gonna go through the notes real quickly. All movement bonuses, such as hunters find the path, should now be suppressed, and everyone should have an equal chance, regardless of their class and their run speed bonuses. There was a syncing issue with the event that should be solved now. All Forester tools, so the Forester axes you can get from the event, are now bind to account instead of bind to character. A really good change there. The Forester event will no longer be controlled by the players when it starts, but instead it will go on repeat every 21 minutes. There will be a 6-minute registration time, and during those 6 minutes you'll have to get the daily quest and then register for the event. And then you'll have to wait for those 6 minutes to finish before you can start. Once the event begins, it'll be a 15-minute cooldown before registration starts again, meaning that the event will happen every 21 minutes. And finally, we have some minor changes that I'm not really going to go through in detail. Some minor changes and some known issues with the Mariner class. If you enjoyed the video, please consider dropping a like and subscribing, as it really helps out the channel. And if you like Lotro, I would really recommend joining my Discord servers. You can also support me directly through my Ko-fi website. If you're playing or looking to play Lord of the Rings online, there is one place you need to be. The Ghyniverse is a Discord server created for the community of the players of Lord of the Rings Online. The server is getting close to 7,000 members, and in this server you'll find tons of helpful information. There's monthly giveaways, easy access to patch notes, you can keep up with my YouTube videos, my streams. If you're a streamer, you can ask for the streamer role and you can announce your streams in the other stream channel. There are discussion channels for pretty much everything, every class, monster players. But the best thing about this server is probably the Gearing Resources tab, where you can find anything from trait lines for every class, every build. There are stat goals, where you can find out what stats you should aim for on your characters. Really helpful information about drop rates from instances, as well as screenshot from all the new loot that appears in the game. If you enjoy Lotro, you should definitely consider joining this server, and hopefully I'll see you in Middle-earth. If you were part of the Ghyniverse already, you might have noticed that another tab appeared at the top, the LFF server. This server is a brand new server that I created, the LFF Ghyniverse. In this server, you can select which servers you want to keep up with, and once you select your server, say you select Arkenstone, you will see the LFF, the kinship advertisement, looking for kinship and trade channels, and there's also voice channels if people want to use those. The LFF channel is basically a looking for fellowship channel where people can post if they need players for the runs, and this way people don't have to be logged into the game to see the chat, they can just instead get a notification on their Discord. There's also a kinship advertisement page where kins can post their kinship advertisement and have people join their kins, and you can also post in the looking for kinship chat if you're looking for a kinship, but make sure to take a look in the kinship advertisement first and look through all the kin to find a suitable kin for you. There's also a trade channel if people want to buy or sell stuff that you can use. Hopefully you'll consider joining this server to bring the community even more together, not just in the game, but also outside of the game.